how do we actually crown God as our king? How do we even envision ourselves doing that? What does that even mean practically? So first of all, just a cute little anecdote to begin. I have 5 kids. Actually, my first 3 girls were born on Rosh Hashana. Literally, like right after hearing the shofar blowing, I went right to the hospital and gave birth. Like crazy story that all 3 girls were born on Rosh Hashana. What's also crazy about it was right after shofar blowing. So when I had my 4th child, my 4th girl, I wasn't due until November. And so I was actually afraid to go hear the shofar because I was like, wait, I'm not ready to have this. It was kind of crazy. But so our last daughter that was born on Rosh Hashana, her name is Livia, which is actually reflective of Rosh Hashana because Livia means a crown, not the animal lion. Livia Tchein from Mishlei is to crown, or the crown of grace. So literally when giving birth to her, we were quite literally trying to crown Hashem as our king. So how does that really work practically? I guess, there's a couple of concepts that I would love to share. The first one that I heard from Rabbi Simchani Machlis, it's super quick, super easy, kind of standing on one foot answer. And she said something so profound that it has stayed with me for many, many years. She said, we think we're so busy. We're running here, we're running there, we're doing this, we're doing that, busy. She said, no, there is only one thing to do at any given point in time. And that's Ratzon Hashem. That's it. There's a question we have to all ask ourselves at any point in time throughout our day. And that is, what does Hashem want from me right now? That's it. There is nothing else to do. Like in this moment right now, I have a choice. Either humble myself and move closer to God, or I move farther from God. And when we break it down into a moment-to-moment choice, I think it really simplifies things. So, the other day, it was a super hectic Friday. Friday morning, I had a million things to do. I got the kids off to school super early. The baby was actually still sleeping. I had a small chunk of time that I could daven, right? But if I'm honest, and I probably shouldn't admit this on a podcast, but if I'm honest, what I really wanted to do in that chunk of time was to kind of get some things done off my list because it was such a long list. And I rationalized. I said, okay, I'll daven later. It's fine. And I said, who am I kidding, right? I stopped myself and I said, what does Hashem want from me right now? I'm going to stop. I'm going to daven because the reality is Hashem is the one that's in control. He is the one that can make the day go smoothly. So what I believe crowning Hashem means is that it means giving up what you want in the moment for what Hashem wants in the moment. But when we break it down into a moment-to-moment basis, rather than like, okay, for the rest of your life, do whatever Hashem wants, when you break it into a moment-to-moment basis, it simplifies it, it makes it more doable, and it makes it achievable. It's an overall concept, but if we can jumpstart it in Elul, it can kind of bring us into the rest of our year. If we start doing this now, maybe it can become a habit. Yeah, so the other day, actually on Friday also, we lost power. And I don't know if you heard about the LA heat wave that was going on or is still going on right now. It's the hottest it's ever been. It was sweltering, like over 100 degrees. We had no AC. We had no Wi-Fi, no electricity. It's dark. It's hot. And it lasted on our street for over 24 hours. So you have to understand, I had so much work to do. Like my computer was dead, the phone was dead. I had so much to do and there was no way to charge it. And there was just literally nothing I could do about it. And what I realized, or what I figured Hashem was saying to me is, look, there is nothing to do. What does Hashem want from you right now? Hashem wants me to stay calm despite my irritability from the heat. He wants me to talk with calmness towards my family. And that's all there is to do. There is nothing else. Like, what does Hashem want from me right now? Give up what you want for what Hashem wants. Surrender yourself. I think also when we go into religion, we have a certain schema of how we want to perform Judaism, so to speak. And then Hashem kind of throws other things in our direction, even for a woman having a baby, right? I personally think the transition from 0 to 1 is one child is one of the hardest, because it goes from everything's about you, everything's about your life and your schedule, and suddenly you're taking care of another human being, and that's Ratzon Hashem. So I actually have a student that called me up the other day, and she's literally like 5 days out from having a baby, and it's her first child, and she's really overwhelmed, and she is also very brilliant and a major overachiever. So this new role of like having to stop everything and take care of a baby and get nothing else done is really, really hard for her. She is an overachiever. And so I told her something that I heard actually from Rachel Hollis in her book, Girl, Wash Your Face. I thought she said it so brilliantly. She said, you have two things on your to-do list when you have a new baby. And that is it. Ready? Am I alive? Check. Is my baby alive? Check. To do, list over, right? But as a society, we always would rather accomplish than connect. But Rosh Hashana is about reevaluating our priorities and choosing connection over accomplishment. And that's what I think it means to crown Hashem. This is literally what I told my student. I said to her, look, it's really hard to adjust your expectations of yourself. As I said before, I think that transition from 0 to 1 is the hardest. It is brutal. But I told her, listen, you got this. Get more help if you can't stand low productivity levels. That's also part of, self-care. But remember that our society hardwires us to achieve. But our neshama wants to connect, and connection is a higher value in Judaism. And this is one way that we crown Hashem. We give up what we consider to be important, accomplishing, responding to the text, doing another task, with what Hashem thinks is important, which is connecting to Him, connecting to our families, and connecting to each other. I think connection is a very high value in Judaism, because Judaism is not just a religion, it's a relationship. It's to stop what you're doing and connect with whoever it is you're meant to be connecting with in that moment, whether it's Hashem, whether it's your family, your spouse, your children. I don't think it's just about a parent-child role. I think it's really hard to stop what we're doing. But that's what I was talking about before with the whole davening. I had so many things to do, and I had to stop myself. I literally had to stop myself and say, okay, I'm going to give up what I want right now and have a connection, because that's what it's really all about. I think that's what life is about. The first one is, what does Hashem want from me right now? That's our only task. Okay, second concept is really talking to Hashem like He's right there with you. So it's funny, I once attended this lecture. I was actually a teen at the time. I think it was like an NCSY program at the time. And the rabbi gets up and he says to the entire crowd of like 200 people, and he's like, I've only prayed a few times in my life. And we're all kind of sitting there like completely shocked, total disbelief. Here this religious rabbi is standing in front of us telling us he's already, he's never even davened, and he's already led 3 davening services. Like, what did all this mean? That he could count on his hand the number of times he really prayed. And that's when you surrender yourself completely to Hashem. And he described a prayer that is so heartfelt that the person may begin like shaking or crying or just intensely praying, and you're literally leaving your heart on a platter for God. That's what he was describing as prayer. And that is actually, we see that in Hannah, which is what we read about in Rosh Hashana in the Haftarah. Hannah was barren. She prayed for a child so intensely that the Kohen literally thought she was drunk, right? People were making fun of her, drunken woman. But it was precisely that drunken prayer, so to speak, that tipped the scales, and Hashem gave her a child, Shmuel. And additionally, what I find to be amazing is that this prayer was considered so powerful that the laws of tefillah were developed from this moment. And in my own life, I remember I one time, had a Chana moment, had a prayer like that. I'll tell you what happened. My son was about 2 years old at the time. Now, he's a teenager in high school, but he was 2 years old, and I started having these really debilitating headaches, which intensified. I did not know what was going on. It was really, really, really bad. And my mom actually flew in from out of state just to help me so that I could, to help me with my son so I could go for testing. And I go into this MRI. I'm young, this was a while ago. And I tried to remain calm, and they're playing all the calming music, and I'm inside the MRI. And at one point in the middle of the test, the technician comes into the room and he says, Mrs. Pachter, can I inject some fluid into your arm? We need to take a second look. And I said, okay, is this you just the middle and ask everyone to he gulps and he's like, no, Mrs. Pachter, this is not standard. We see something on the left side of your brain. Okay. So at this point I'm shaking and I'm like, okay, yeah, go ahead, do what you need to do. And, he injected the fluid, he repeats another scan. At this point, I'm in the MRI. I'm feeling like I'm in this coffin-like structure. my whole body began to tremble, and I'm crying, and tears are coming down my face. And I started praying like I had never prayed before. I literally, in that MRI, started talking to Hashem like he was right there with me inside there, like whispering to him, like he could hear any sound coming out of my mouth. And I said to Hashem, like, please, Hashem, if this is your will, I accept it, but please no, like, who is going to take care of my son? That's all I could think about. Like, how am I going to be a good mom to my son? Please, Hashem, don't give me this challenge. And I remembered leaving the medical office just completely shaken to my core. And a couple of days later, miraculously, by miracle of miracles, they realized it was merely scar tissue from a viral meningitis that I had contracted years prior, and it was nothing to be concerned about. But even long after the fear of that moment passed, the intensity, right, it has remained with me. Like, nobody was in the room with me that day, but I was not alone. And that connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu has remained with me since. It was really like my Hannah moment. And what I find so interesting is that, Hannah's prayer was revolutionary at the time. And her intensity made other people, as I said before, assume she was drunk. But she showed us what it means to pray, right? Pray like nobody's watching, And then when you do that, you reach this unbounded connection to Hashem. And this is how we crown Hashem, is when we recognize that we don't have to be in a moment of desperation to talk to God like he's right there. We can bring him into our everyday lives. There's this great book by Hannah Weisberg. It's called One Baby Step at a Time. I highly recommend it. I thought it was brilliant. And she coins this term, what she calls the mad woman mutterer. And she's saying, like, you're going throughout your day, you're doing laundry, you're doing this, you're at work, like, talk to Hashem like he's right there, even for the most mundane things, like, help me handle my tantruming child, help me find the dress for the bat mitzvah, help me get this project deadline on time, help me bite my tongue when someone says something outrageous. Whatever it is, start bringing God into your daily lives, really experiencing what real connection is. And through this, we crown Hashem, preparing ourselves for Rosh Hashana. I just, for the first time, completed Nishmat for 40 days. And that is all thanks to a really good friend of mine. This is my shout out to you, Adina. She literally helped me. I mean, she reminded me every day, and so I finally got through it, and it was a great segue. But that's actually the third technique that I have for everyone. And I'm going to make a bold statement, like, not everyone's going to like me right now, but I'm going to say it anyways. I believe that the third way that we crown Hashem is to thank Hashem, not just for the good. It's funny, I was actually talking to a student of mine, or a client or whatever, on the phone, and she was telling me, and I'm telling her this statement, and it was like she couldn't even understand it. She was like, wait, what do you mean? Like, if I thank Hashem, and she's not religious yet fully, but she says to me, like, if I thank Hashem for the bad, isn't he just going to keep giving me the bad? Like, it like did not cross her mind as something that would even help her. I tried to like break it down. I kind of explained, but I just want to tell you the analogy that I told her. So basically, like, and bear with me with this imagery, but imagine God's up in the sky, right? And humans, we're all down here on earth, and we are holding out a vessel, like a kli, right? A vessel or a cup, and we're collecting the flow of bracha from God, right? So if you have an 8-ounce cup, you're going to be able to hold 8 ounces of bracha. If you've got a 20-ounce cup, like, depending on how big your vessel is. So using rain as the analogy, when God brings down rain, so to speak, you hold your cup out, and then you can hold the water, right? The kli is what holds it. That we widen our vessel or make it bigger, right, is through gratitude. And when we express gratitude to Hashem, the vessel gets bigger. We therefore hold more blessing in our lives. And if you think about it, even logically, from a parent standpoint, if you have children, it kind of makes sense. As I mentioned before, I have 5 kids. They range between ages 15 and 1. And so there's not a ton of activities that I can do on a Sunday that pleases everybody, but the beach is one of them. So when I go to the beach, one of 2 things happens when we get back in the car after the beach. Either my kids are in a great mood and they're like, wow, thank you, mommy, so much. And for schlepping and organizing. And they're really, really grateful. And I'm already thinking, like, I can't wait to bring them back to the beach. I'm already dreaming of all the other things I could do for them. Like, oh, we're going to go to this trampoline place next week, right? I want to do so much for them. sometimes I wish I could say we were like the perfect family and every time they get in the car being pleased and grateful, but that's just not how it works. So half the time we get into the car and they're like, oh, I'm hot. Stop touching me. Ugh, my feet are sandy. You know, they're arguing and they're totally not even thanking any of us or each other or anything. And all I can think about when they do that is, yeah, they're not big enough to come here, right? They need to grow up. They need to get bigger, right? And the way that we get bigger is through gratitude. That's how we widen our kli, so to speak, so that we can receive more from Hashem. So that's your baseline gratitude, right? Thanking God for the good that he does. But when we stretch ourselves and we start thanking God even for the bad in our lives, that's when things start to transform and our years turn from Shana Tova to Shana Great, right? To go even more maximum. So if I can kind of tell you with the story that I heard, I thought it was very, very powerful. I first heard this from Charlie Harari, and then I also actually read it in Rabbi Shalom Arush's book. It's called Thank God and See Miracles. I'm sorry that I say all the names of the books. I just like to give credit. But this woman was childless for many, many years. And she came to Rav Shalom Arush, and she's asking him for a bracha. And as they were finishing up, he's kind of escorting her out and saying, bracha ve'etzlacha, whatever. And he goes, there is something that you could do to help. And I was like, actually, never mind. And she's like, wait, no. Like, she saw his deliberation, and she was like, what were you about to say? Like, is it a specific to him? Is it a specific segur? Like, tell me, I'll do anything. And he goes, no, don't worry. You're not going to do it. Don't worry. He says, bracha ve'etzlacha. And he's trying to, send her off. And she's like, no, I traveled hours to get here. You have to tell me what it was you were going to say. I will do anything. So he kind of reluctantly starts, and he's like, for 1 hour each day, go into a private room alone by yourself and thank Hashem that you don't have a child. And she's flabbergasted. She's just completely shocked. And she's like, I don't understand. Like, I came all this way, and is this a joke? Like, you're telling me to thank God that I don't have a child? He goes, see, I knew you weren't going to do it. Bracha be'etzlacha, go home. It's fine. I knew you weren't going to do it anyways. Thank you. So she goes home, and she turns to her husband that night, and she's like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And she decides right then and there she is going to thank Hashem for the bad. She is going to thank Hashem for what she perceives as bad, and she go ahead and she every day thanks him for not giving her a child. And 1 year later, this couple welcomed a baby boy into their lives, and Rabbi Shalom Arush served as the sandik. Miracles like this all the time. I mean, this is all the time, these kinds of miracles. And as I mentioned before, the way that it works, it's not that God's going to keep giving you bad if you thank him for the bad. The way that it works is that when what we perceive as bad, right, when bad happens to us, suffering is meant to move us. It's meant to cause us to grow or to change, right? Suffering is kind of like being on the platform of a subway station, and you've got trains going in opposing directions. You're on the platform. You are getting on one of the trains. Either it's going to move you closer to your goal, or it's going to move you farther away, but you are not staying on that platform. Suffering moves us. So here's what happens. When I look at something that I perceive as bad happening, and I say, okay, Hashem, thank you for this bad thing. We no longer need the bad event to move us because we moved ourselves. We grew. We changed. And that bad challenge or nisayon is no longer needed to move us because we moved ourselves, and therefore it disappears. When we move ourselves through gratitude, the challenge disappears. Right, like a lot of times, first of all, when I started practicing this, and I have seen the most insane miracles, I don't even want to get into all of them right now, but even with an insincere thank you, like I think I think the first answer is you have to start somewhere. No one's going to be able to get up and be like, yes, everything is truly for the good, right. And I'm so perfect. Like, none of us are necessarily there. You have to start with lip service, so to speak, from lo lishma ba lishma, like. You start with something, and it grows and it develops. But I also think we can come to a place where we eventually do actually perceive the bad as good. And if I can tell you just a very quick story, it's a fabulous story from Rav Biederman. After the story, a man by the name of Michael. He owned a ton of real estate in a really bad area of town. And I'm talking like the kind of place you don't even want to go during the daytime. And he had this meeting with someone down there. He had to head out there. So he goes in his car and he has an envelope of $40,000 of cash in his car, right? And he's going to meet with whoever it is. He drives down, he parks, he hops out of the car, and he goes to meet with the person, and they're talking. And in the middle of their conversation, he realizes, oh my gosh, I left the envelope in the car. So he drops everything and races back to the car. And as he's getting closer to the car, he sees the window has been shattered. It's been broken into. And his heart drops, and he's like, I can't believe it. I can't believe I left the $40,000 in there. I can't believe it. And he's just so upset with himself. And he opens up the car door, and he sees, wait a minute, the envelope is still there. And he opens up the envelope, and all the money, every last dollar is still there. And he starts profusely thanking Hashem. He's like, oh my gosh, look at this miracle, look at this miracle. And he realizes, what did they steal? They stole like two, technologies, like an iPhone and an iPod or whatever, an iPad, whatever it was. And he's thanking Hashem profusely. And he's like, I can't believe this miracle. He calls his wife and he's telling her about this miracle that happened. And later that night, he realized, oh my gosh, imagine, right? I had driven down there and there was no 40,000. It would have been a terrible day. This guy breaks into my car and he steals all my technology, and now I have to get my car fixed, and now I have to get new technology. It would have been an expensive, irritating, annoying day. Only because of the $40,000 was it transformed into a miraculous day.
Right.
And that's really all of us. We all have this $40,000 envelope in our possession, whatever it is. If you can walk across the room, if you can see in front of your face, if you have a healthy body, or whatever gift it is that's worth far more than $40,000, then everything through that lens can become a miraculous day. Anything bad that happens to us, when we start viewing it through that lens, that at least I still have my 40,000 or whatever gift it is, everything can become miraculous in that way. So yes, we're thanking God for the bad. Yes, we're thanking God for the good. But how is that crowning God? Right? So what happens is when we, number one, notice the good in everything, and number two, when we submit what we think is best for us for what Hashem believes is best, right? When we submit what we think is best for what Hashem knows is best, that's how God becomes our king. I've literally tried this. I've started thanking Hashem for even the most small irritants or whatever it is, for example, the power outage, right? And miracles took place. So I think it's a win-win. I mean, either things get better and your life improves, or your perspective changes and you become a happier person. So I don't think you ever lose by thanking Hashem. And I think in these three ways, by recapping, what does Hashem want from me in this moment alone? Like, don't try to do everything at once. Just look at the moment that's in front of your face and say, what does Hashem want from me right now? Talk to him like he's right there next to you, and thank him for the bad. And I think when we start to practice these three things, we're really going to come into Rosh Hashana feeling like Hashem is our God, Hashem is our King, and feeling that really close connection with him. Part of the preparation, and then hopefully that will jumpstart you into your entire year. I'm an author. I'm an educator. I've been speaking and lecturing for 16 years. I've been writing for 7 years. I wrote my first article just 7 years ago, and already I've written 2 books. I'm so grateful to Hashem for that. My first book was Small Choices, Big Changes, published by Targum, which I think is really apropos to the new year in Rosh Hashana. It's always a good read, in this time period. My most recent book, though, is called Is It Ever Enough? And that's was published by Feldheim. And that book is really about overcoming perfectionism and kind of debunking that myth or that lie of perfection. And it's about being satisfied with who we are, what we have, and I think both books are actually really books about growth, where what we're trying to do is we're trying to stretch ourselves enough so that we're challenged, we're not bored, but we don't want to stretch too much that we shut down. And it's that place of balance that we all struggle with that I think this book really addresses. Both books actually have very, very short chapters, which I did purposefully because it offers the reader like kind of like a quick pick-me-up. You can read it a chapter at a time, or this one reviewer said, I thought it was really nice what she said. She goes, beware, she says you may end up reading the whole book in one sitting. I thought that was cute. But I think overall the main thing is that my goal is to make Torah relevant and accessible to everyone, no matter what your religious level is, and to make it compelling and memorable, because honestly, like, otherwise, what's the point? Like, it has to be relevant, or it's just not going to penetrate. So that's a little bit about my book. As I mentioned, I have 5 kids. We live in LA. And, my goal, I gear my classes for the most distractible person. I want the person who cannot pay attention to anything to not help, but be involved and be interested and like want to hear what the next thing is on the lecture, whatever the case is. So, I mean, that's my goal here, because it has to be accessible to everyone. Otherwise, what are we really doing here? We just are accomplishing, but really it's about connection. And I think if we can remember that, we're all going to be in a better place this Rosh Hashana.